Hello and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News channel. Today we're going to talk about max supply, circulating supply, and market cap and why these things matter. Don't listen to those people that tell you market cap doesn't matter. That's just because they have a really high market cap coin already, and they want you to believe that it has infinite potential, which it honestly doesn't. That's why smaller coins tend to have more potential than larger coins, although they are more risky. But let's actually talk about max supply and circulating supply. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is like coin with max supply, good. Coin without max supply, bad. Inflation. And coins with max supply don't have inflation. That's actually wrong. Circulating supply, much of the time, is actually more important than max supply. Just because a coin has a max supply does not mean it should be worth more than a coin without a max supply. Let's actually take a look at Dogecoin and Shiba Inu to actually illustrate this point. Now, Dogecoin does not have a max supply. Shiba Inu does. But that does not mean Shiba Inu is worth more than Dogecoin, at least per coin. The circulating supply of Dogecoin is 132 billion. Now, Dogecoin, I believe it's hard-coded in that it increases by 5 billion per year, and they can't really change that because Jackson Palmer screwed them somehow. Now, the thing is, its current supply is 132 billion, so the inflation rate's actually around 4% right now. When it has a trillion coins in a couple hundred years, it will still be 5 billion coins inflation, or 0.5%. So as Dogecoin gets more and more supply, the inflation as a percentage actually gets less and less. Shiba Inu has nearly no inflation because the circulating supply is 549 trillion, but the max supply is only 589 trillion. I'm not really sure what they plan to do with the other 40 trillion coins, but the max supply is so close to the circulating supply that it's not really relevant for our discussion. But that does not mean in any way that each Shiba Inu should be worth as much as each Doge, or even nearly as much as each Doge, even though it has a max supply. And even though this doesn't actually really have inflation because the max supply is so close to the circulating supply. The fact is, you still have 549 trillion coins out there. Whereas with Doge, you only have 132 billion coins. And remember, Doge is locked in at 5 billion coins per year inflation. Now that rate is very, very important. Now, if you have a coin that is basically doesn't have any limits, it's giving you everyone like 10,000% APR, yes, that's like rampant inflation. You don't want to really buy that coin for very long. But in terms of Doge, think about comparing Doge and Shiba Inu. You basically have a coin that Shiba Inu essentially has over 500 trillion more supply than Doge. So at Doge's current inflation rate of 5 billion per year, it would take 200 years for it to even reach 1 trillion. It would take over 10,000 years for it to even reach close to Shiba Inu. I think it's either 10,000 or 100,000. It actually might be 100,000 years for it to even reach close to Shiba Inu's supply. Now, whether it takes 10,000 years or 100,000 years is entirely irrelevant because you'll be dead by then. So because you're not going to live 10,000 years or 100,000 years, and because you're not going to hold onto the coin for 10,000 years or 100,000 years, and your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandkids may not even be on Earth anymore at that point, it is completely irrelevant to the discussion at hand. So Dogecoin should and will always be worth more than Shiba Inu per coin unless Dogecoin just becomes useless and everyone drops it, which is I doubt will actually happen. So based on that circulating supply, Dogecoin will always be more important than Shiba Inu, or not important, but Dogecoin will always be worth more than Shiba Inu per coin, because even with the inflation, it would take thousands, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of years for Dogecoin to even keep up with Shiba Inu's supply. The only new reason that can change is if Shiba Inu burns like 99.9% of its coins, and then it would actually be kind of close to Dogecoin supply. So the thing is, that is where the circulating supply is far more important than the max supply when you're actually looking at tokenomics. Because the circulating supply, the max supply is like the max theoretical supply that something could actually have. The circulating supply is actually how much is in the market right now. And that's the thing that actually physically affects the supply and demand. The max supply does not actually affect the supply and demand. It could be a psychological thing, sure. But the thing is, like, physically right now, it does not affect the supply and demand. It's the circulating supply that does, which is why circulating supply, I find, like, more than 50-60% of the time is much more important than max supply. And realistically, if your circulating supply is much, much less than your max supply, it'll take some coins will take many years, like 10 or 20 coins, for the max supply to equal the circulating supply, and you're releasing more of the max supply each year, then in reality, your coin does actually have inflation, even though you say like it can't go above this number. Yes, but right now you're at this number, and that number is actually going to increase for the next 20 or 40 years until it gets to the max supply number. So technically, you are actually inflating the actual supply out in the market by X amount. Whether like, XRP obviously has a max supply and has a circulating supply, but more is actually being added into the circulating supply each year. So technically, it does actually have inflation on like a realistic level. Now, it won't go past 99 billion, but right now from 49 billion to 99 billion, it's going to actually be inflating until then. Yes, there is a burn rate for some coins, but that's more or less irrelevant because they actually kind of tune it to where it really doesn't affect the supply at all. And that's actually good because if a coin's burn rate is going to affect the supply in the short run, it's really not a viable ecosystem. And that's true for a lot of other coins. Like Ethereum technically does not have a max supply. And yes, it has inflation, but the inflation is very, very low, almost near zero, that the inflation is more or less irrelevant. So you can kind of act like Ethereum could have a max supply of like twice, maybe 2.5 times its current supply because it's going to take hundreds of years for it to reach that supply. And we're not going to be here in hundreds of years. So realistically, any kind of like infinite supply theory for Ethereum is utterly irrelevant. It's basic math. Basically, like if a coin is only inflating by 0.01% a year, it might as well not be inflating because that's not really going to affect it very, very much at all. And the thing is, people lose these coins. So in reality, if the actual inflation rate is like really only 0.01%, it's probably deflating because people are losing more coins that are actually being brought out into the market. So I think in reality, Ethereum actually has a lower inflation rate than Bitcoin because Bitcoin is 18 million right now. The max supply is 21 million in 2140. So essentially, you're inflating by about 30% in about 100-something years. Now, that's not a lot of inflation, but I still think it's slightly greater than Ethereum's inflation of like 0.1% a year. And some people even say that like they're burning more Ethereum than they're actually creating, which honestly, I don't think would be good tokenomics. But because of that, Ethereum might actually have lower real inflation in Bitcoin. Remember, real inflation in crypto is how much your circulating supply is increasing each year, not how much your max supply is or how much it's actually increasing. You need to think of it as an investment, but that investment's also based on like how much of this coin is actually out in the market, not how much theoretical coin there actually can be, because you don't want to like look out in the horizon of 20, 30, 40, 50, or 100 years in crypto. You kind of want to look out in the horizon of 2 to 5 years maybe, because the market changes so much. So that's one thing. And yes, I'm going to talk about why market cap does actually matter. It has everything to do with how much pressure there is on sales. And there is a specific reason why your coin's not going to get to tens of trillions or hundreds of trillions in market cap, just because no one really has the liquidity to actually buy your coins when someone sells. If you're already like a coin that's like 20, 30 billion in market cap and it goes 100x, you are at least $2 or $3 trillion in market cap. And some of those whales and even mid-level investors will have billions of dollars worth of coins. Now, once one of them decides to sell or a few of them decides to sell, it's game over because no one's going to have the liquidity to absorb those sales. Even big institutions, when you're talking about tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars worth of buys, they really don't have the liquidity to purchase that kind of coins. So when one of those whales, even one of those whales sells parts of their bag to cash in, then your coin's going to be screwed and it's going to go straight down. And the thing is, like, someone's going to sell way before that. I know people are making up idealistic scenarios where everyone holds, no one sells as your coin goes up 100x for a large cap coin. But that's not realistic at all when we actually look at, in reality, what's actually happened. The higher market cap your coin goes, the more money it takes to push it up, and also the heavier the sell pressure will be, and at some point that will break. This is why coins that have a couple $1 million worth of market cap can go to 100 million, because absorbing a couple $1 million or tens of millions of dollars if someone sells, it's much easier than absorbing like, tens of trillions of dollars or even trillions of dollars in sales. Because even the big bank organizations don't have that much liquidity to buy your coin. And they're not going to want to buy your coin when the whale is selling, because they're basically banking on that other whales won't sell. Because if other whales will sell and they buy it at that high price, they're going to go bankrupt. So banks are not going to take that kind of risk either. Neither are large institutions. They have a buying plan that doesn't involve buying $2 trillion of this coin at once. And when they see that kind of sell, they're going to actually hold back. That's why like these coins are never really going to reach those kind of prices. Because once these large cap coins, once someone sees like triple or quadrupling in price, they're going to want to start selling. And like once one whale decides to sell, or a couple of mid-level investors decide to sell, it's essentially game over, because there's so much sell pressure on the coin. Like if your coin roughly has like, $5 trillion in market cap, even if a couple of whales sell, that's going to be hundreds of billions of dollars that actually need to be absorbed, and no one's going to be able to absorb that. The banks aren't stupid, so they're not going to absorb that and watch the price go down. And no other investor is going to have that amount of money, and the price is going to go straight down, because once you have that much selling pressure and very little buying pressure compared to the selling pressure, the obviously supply and demand balance basically falls apart, and you're probably going to drop to maybe like 20-30% of the price, or really what you actually pumped from. So because the selling pressure is so massively great, none of these like random theories of coin world domination are really ever going to happen. That's why like Shea and Ellis theory and all those things are completely bunk, because in a dynamic market, plus you also have market makers and you have bots, which will shoot the price straight down. All these like theories depend on some crazy ass thing where like big institutions all of a sudden pour out trillions of dollars, which they do not have in liquidity, by the ways, to actually buy your coin, and hoping that no big whale actually sells. That is completely and utterly unrealistic and will never happen in reality, and it just wouldn't happen in a dynamic market. If you try to pump the price on one exchange up to that much, other like market makers and bots will basically just even it out among all exchanges. And once the price actually gets high enough, everyone's going to want to sell, and the coin will run straight down. That's what's always happened, and that's generally what always will happen in a market, because you can't depend on people not being greedy. If your strategy basically depends on holders not being greedy, then you need a new strategy. So that is my spiel for today. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe. Hit that bell notifications button. Thank you, and have a nice day.